Premier Rachel Notley and Finance Minister Cici held a Budget 2016 meeting with ethnic TV, radio, and print media on April 15th in Edmonton. Calgary and Edmonton media participated in the meeting. Here are some question answers from the meeting.
Thank you for spending some time with us. As you know, Budget 2016 was released yesterday, the Alberta Jobs Plan. And for those of you who travel up to be here, thanks for taking the time and the trip. So yesterday we presented our latest budget to the legislature and to Albertans. This budget was developed with a clear direction and feedback from Albertans throughout the province. The Premier and I and myself and MLAs spent time going around and talking to Albertans in different constituencies. We did telephone town halls where 66,000 Albertans contacted us or listened in online to find out what was going on with regard to the budget. We had thousands upon thousands of emails to us telling us what they expect from government with regard to this budget. Albertans recognize that our province is facing a once-in-a-generation challenge, economic challenge. The downturn in our economy has been significant. In 2015 and 2016, it's the likes of which we have not seen for a very, very long time, 1982 and 1983. Alberta families and businesses are feeling a lot of hurt, but we are taking the time to get a budget right that'll help move us all forward again. And there's no doubt that we are faced with a choice. The choice we decided to make was with regard to supporting Albertans and businesses. We could have decided to slash and burn programs and services. That's been done in the past. It's been done in other places in North America and in the world. That puts your society back. It is difficult to climb out of the hole that happens when you don't invest in infrastructure, when you cut your programs. You put the responsibility on the backs of your population. We don't want that to be the legacy left for Albertans. So we decided not to lay off people. We decided to fill the hole that's left behind by private capital not investing, and we are stepping up and investing capital throughout the province. We want to act as a shock absorber in these times. That means maintaining vital services while carefully managing our public spending. We chose that because we think Albertans depend on their services now more than ever. Over the next 3 years, our operating budget growth will increase by an average of only 2% per year. This will be well below population and inflation growth and far below the spending increases of previous governments. This is what we believe Albertans demanded of us: strategic cost control while ensuring access to quality public services, and that's what we're going to deliver.
So yes, I want to begin, of course, by thanking all of you for being here and taking the time to come here and so that we can have an exchange and answer some of the questions which I'm sure you have about this budget. Budget 2016, comes at a very, very important time in Alberta's history. As Minister Cici has said, we have an unprecedented collapse in oil prices, and that's hurting our economy and it's hurting families. And so, as I said in my televised address last week, we understand that this is actually quite a scary time for many Albertans. We know unemployment has risen and is rising dramatically. And of course, you've heard already that the fiscal situation of the government is also challenged with the dramatic drop in revenues that we've experienced. And of course, Minister Cici's talked about that. So, as Minister Cici alluded to, we sort of have a choice when we get to a situation like this. We can engage the way previous governments have, where with the massive drop in the price of oil, we ourselves also engage in making deep, deep cuts to our budget. Jeopardizing the quality of public health that we provide, and laying off teachers and in growing our class sizes and generally starting our education system. That's happened in the past. Some suggest that that's essentially what we should do again, and the difference here is that we disagree with that very, very much. And it's important to understand that the healthcare budget and the education budget combined are almost 70% of our budget. So when you hear us talking about nurses and teachers, it's because that is such a big part of what our provincial government does. And when you consider that the drop in revenues essentially amounts to almost a 20% drop in our revenue, then you can imagine the difficulty of the choices that we're faced with. So we've made a decision that instead of those kinds of short-sighted cuts, we are going to invest in Albertans and invest in our communities and invest in businesses to try and help our province through these difficult times. So we're going to protect healthcare and education, that I was just talking about. We're going to do this while we control the costs of government, primarily, as Minister Cici said, limiting the rate of growth carefully, cautiously, thoughtfully. And then we're acting to support small and medium business to work towards that job creation endeavor that is so fundamentally important. So you've probably heard that in terms of our small business and business support efforts, we've done a number of things, and Minister Cici's led on a number of these things. Of course, we've engaged in, or we've dropped the small business tax from 3% to 1%.
2%.
Or sorry, 3% to 2%, sorry about that. And we've introduced 2 investor tax credits, which will be significantly helpful to small businesses and medium-sized enterprises that are worth roughly $170 million each. We've also established several other programs that work with emerging businesses in an incubator fashion, that also reach out to international business to find ways in which to support our efforts to have more home offices located here in Alberta. And also an additional plan that we introduced about 2 months ago, which was our petrochemical diversification. It's a $500 million royalty credit for businesses that come and upgrade petrochemical products here in Alberta. And so, and then as well, we've invested about $10 million into regional economic development efforts and plans across the province, so that community users, local business people, and municipalities in particular regions of the province can come together and have resources to come together to develop their own regional economic efforts that sort of work with each other. So those are some of the things that we've invested in above and beyond the capital investment, which Minister Cici spoke about, the $34 billion, which in and of itself raises our GDP in a measurable way. And we get that capital and that important economic infrastructure in place at a time when labor is available, people are looking for jobs, and materials are cheaper. So it's a counter-cyclical investment that experts have been telling us for years that we need to do, which in the past previous governments have failed to do. They've followed the cycle as opposed to countering the cycle. And it's a little bit tough to counter the cycle when you're short of money, but if you are confident in the outcome of your province, it's exactly the right thing to do. And so that's what we've done. So we know we can't control the price of oil, as much as people sometimes claim that it's entirely up to us. We know we can't control it, but what we can do is control how we respond to the change in the price of oil. And so we've made a different decision, one that's focused on stability, one that's focused on providing those important services to families and communities, one that's focused on job creation, and one that's essentially focused on investing in the future. So that's what we've done, and we're happy to take your questions once Thomas...
I really commend the Premier and Minister Cici for the wonderful job you are doing at these circumstances. It's tough times, you know.
Yes.
I remember when President Obama came into power and these were the similar circumstances, and he turned it around. Yeah, I compare to that. So hopefully, you know, we see that you said that the budget will be balanced in 2024. It looks far, but I think if we all work together and for the common people, for the budget, I saw that this is for the common people, so without raising any taxes. And so, keeping that in mind, I really am encouraged that we have the right people at the top.
Well, it's really encouraging to hear you look long-term and say that, because that's part of our thinking. Is I'm aiming to balance in 2024, but in the meantime, we know Albertans still need things. So to go quicker would hurt the many things that are happening in this province that need to happen to get us through this downturn. But if the economy picks up, and we think it will, in 2017 it'll start to be positive again, we can balance sooner.
That's true, because every effect in change in oil price or anything, it takes about 6 to 9 months to absorb into the economy. So I'm pretty sure it's a little longer than that in this case.
No, I think as Joe has outlined, I mean, we've injected some fairly conservative assumptions into when he talks about aiming for 2024. One thing that you probably are all aware is that one of the things we put into this budget that is new is a risk factor, because we got really tired of people giving us numbers on the price of oil and then it changing. So this year there's a $700 million risk factor that's built in there if oil is lower than what we projected. Next year it's $1.5 billion. So we're building that in, and so that 10.4 deficit includes that, and that 2024 includes that we have to use that whole risk factor every year. And so things may improve more quickly, but at the end of the day, what we want people to know is that there's a plan forward, but in the short term, the way we get to success is by investing in jobs, investing in infrastructure, investing in job creation opportunities.
Sure. Maybe somebody from this side of the room.
Yes, the budget is said to be the Alberta job plan, and only $250 million over a 2 years period having specifically set the job plan.
The whole book, the whole budget book is the jobs plan, and it includes, of course, this $8.5 billion capital investment this year, and that, along with the diversification monies that will stimulate private sector people to invest in small and medium-sized businesses, can be thought of as a jobs plan. So it's the whole budget book, and it includes a $34.5 billion over 5-year investment in this province that'll put people back to work, because it'll go to municipalities, it'll go to building schools, hospitals, infrastructure, bridges, green transportation, LRTs. So it really is more than just the $250 million, which is significant because it helps diversify our economy through different business investments. But that will all be professional financial people doing that. It won't be us picking winners and losers in terms of businesses. It'll be ATB, Alberta Treasury branches, it'll be AIMCO, Alberta Investment Management Corporation, it'll be Alberta Enterprise Corporation, all of those professionals investing throughout the province and diversifying our too overly dependent current requirements on oil and gas to fund the revenues of the province of Alberta.
I think the other thing to bear in mind in terms of that, so I mean, you identified the $250 million that's in the budget, but and Joe has talked about the capital plan, the $34 billion, and then he's also talked about the capital release, which is the ATB, the AIMCO, and the AEC, which comes to another $2.5 billion, and then there is also the issue of the climate leadership plan. And that's also not identified in that number. And that, once it's fully implemented, it is expected to collect roughly $2.4 billion. And while parts of it are engaged in rebates, parts of it are, of course, the small business tax cut, which we expect will actually help kickstart more job creation. And in addition to that, the investment as Joe said, in the new technology, in incenting renewable energy, And then, of course, the additional infrastructure that's the green infrastructure and the Energy Efficiency Agency. So when you pull it all together, there's actually quite a bit of capital that's being dedicated to efforts that will both diversify and create jobs.
Minister, what kind of job areas of job fields that you thought in your mind when you said $100,000 dollars?
Everything. And that's what we're creating the environment for the development of jobs. Private sector are the people who are going to be investing in hiring people and creating jobs. So if you think about capital infrastructure development, say hospitals, schools, roads, you can quickly see that a lot of construction, a lot of engineers, a lot of planners, a lot of professionals will need to be hired to make that happen, as well as truck drivers to move materials around, people to run packers, as my former press secretary did when she was working in the construction field. Lots and lots of different construction jobs. Initially, off the top of my head, I can see happening.
Would you have done anything differently if you had circumstances of Ralph Klein days?
I'll turn that over to the premier.
Well, I think that's exactly the issue that we're dealing with now. I mean, in fact, Ralph Klein, the slowdown actually occurred several years before Ralph Klein's taking office. But the reality is that essentially Alberta is struggling with two choices. And our view is that the choice that was made previously is not one that we will make. I believe that the economy recovered after the cuts that Klein made, not because of the cuts, but in spite of the cuts. It recovered because the price of oil shot up and because natural gas and land sales kick-started and contributed significantly to the fiscal situation of the province. But at the same time, we had a growing infrastructure debt, and we still to this day are paying the cost of the reductions in education and post-secondary that were made at that time. So I think that Albertans prospered in spite of the decisions that were made in the 90s, not because of them.
Thank you. I think we're going to go over to this side. I think you have your question.
Honorable Premier, as you are aware, tens and thousands of jobs have been lost. So what your government is doing to attract foreign investment?
Well, I think there's a number of things. So first of all, we allocated $5 million in the plan to essentially work to support work that involves reaching out to foreign investors, bringing them to Alberta, showing them what the opportunities are for them, showing them what our infrastructure is, showing them what our labor force is like, and introducing them to Alberta so that they feel more comfortable investing. So that's that $5 million piece that's there. In addition, of course, we continue to be the lowest tax jurisdiction in Canada and one of the lowest tax jurisdictions in North America. And so I think that continues as well to be the kind of thing that will attract investment. As well, I personally believe that our work on the Climate Leadership Plan, because it's got international attention, actually helps us to make the case to international investors that we are a very mature and sophisticated province with tremendous intellectual as well as labor capital that would bring people and attract people here. So, and then of course we have our Minister of Economic Development who is constantly reaching out across the world actually to attract and engage in international investment in the province. So there's a number of things. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just in all of the things, in addition to what the Premier said, we are a stable, healthy environment for investment, and we have infrastructure that's second to none in this world. Hospitals, schools, cultural facilities, these are the kinds of things that companies look for when they go abroad. And we've got the population that's young and willing and ready to engage with all kinds of new businesses in this province. So I think everything here is set for success.
Thank you. For sure. Cool, I think, repeat your question.
What kind of problems do you foresee in implementing and upholding the carbon levy with current and future companies and corporations that are coming into Alberta?
Well, I mean, I think there's no question that the levy is new, and people have to get their head around it a little bit. It's a big policy. It is a leading policy. There's no policy like this in Canada, or in parts of North America, and we are actually leading the continent in this regard. So there's a lot of moving parts, and it's very complex and it's very ambitious. That being said, I think there's actually tremendous opportunities for new companies, new investors, to find a place here that now Alberta. If I were in renewable energy, if I was in energy technology, this is where I'd be coming, because this is where the intellectual and the monetary capital is coalescing in those areas. So I think it's actually a huge opportunity. We have to carefully manage the challenge of phasing off of coal. We need to carefully manage the way in which we incent both greater natural gas and greater renewable energy contribution to our grid. So that's a delicate balancing act, but we've brought in some incredibly capable expertise in that. We hired a coal facilitator about 3 weeks ago who is internationally recognized as probably being the world leading expert on electricity production, coal-fired electricity production, and the phasing out of that. He previously sort of ran the whole northeast sector of electricity production in the U.S. It's a complex issue, but we're seeking the talent to make sure we get it right. So there's challenges, but there's huge opportunities as well, and that is one of the things that I'm very excited about, because as I say, we're already recognized as a leader. I don't know how many of you people know this, but when the Prime Minister met with the President 3 or 4 weeks ago, they talked about 3 things, and one of them was Alberta's methane reduction plan, which is part of our climate leadership plan that we announced in the fall. That is laying the groundwork for what you're going to see across the U.S. in terms of methane reduction efforts. And we're ahead of the game, and we've got a mechanism in place to help fund the technology that will keep us ahead of the game. So that's very exciting.
For sure. Mary, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to quote a comment. The response out there over the radio is that this budget is the way to go. No other governments will do any difference. So that's a good comment. However, also there's a response to the budget is there is question, 2 questions to this budget. Number one, which you must have heard many times, is a plan to repay.
Right.
However, I add one more question to it. In order to repay, we have to know what are the sources for funding. Because the sources of funding will indirectly or directly influence on the rate of interest payment. So I think Alberta, on the one hand, accept this budget. There's no doubt about it. On the other hand, we want to plan ahead as Alberta, our government. Our government definitely have a plan to plan ahead, is how to repay.
For sure.
Your balanced budget is 2024.
It's my game.
Yeah. However, sorry, Honorable Minister, I'm not challenging you, I'm just quoting the feelings out there. Okay, please understand. Please understand. However, the sources of funding will
For sure, so.
affect
Oh, yeah.
your plan to repay or balance.
Yes. Getting back to balance is something all Albertans believe is important, and we do too.
Yes.
We know that the once-in-a-generation downturn that we are experiencing right now has put pressure on the available sources of revenue. Thank you. For government. We had a choice. We could have, as I said earlier, decided to get back to balance quickly, but it would not have been without significant pain to all of us. Previous governments have done that. The choice we made was to carry this for Albertans for a period of time so that we can see the economy pick up. We know that going forward, we will be incentivizing the business community to diversify the economy. We're going to participate in that. We're going to participate in capital development throughout this province. Private capital is stepped back. They're waiting. They want to see the economic climate improve. So we've stepped forward and we're saying we're going to help the economic climate today because Albertans are hurting. So those two things, as well as trying to bend down the spending that's going on in government, and we are taking money, we are reducing the expenses. Previous governments were spending more than they could afford, but they had high oil prices to back them up. Now with low oil prices, we've said, okay, we're going to reasonably turn down the spending, we're going to incentivize the capital, and those things will help us, and we'll get back to a positive balance as soon as the economy picks up. And if it, and the choice we made, we think is where Albertans want to go. So yes, my personal goal is to try and balance by 2024, and then start to build up our contingency account so we save money for a rainy day, and start to pay back our debt, which is still going to be half the amount of debt of other provinces. So we've got a good balance sheet. We're going to work to make sure the services aren't cut from underneath all of us, and we're going to get to balance as soon as we can.
What impact does the price of oil have on us balancing the budget by 2024?
You know, we, in our 3-year plan, our fiscal plan we show 42, 54, and 64 dollars a barrel. But as the Premier said, we've risk adjusted each of those amounts. This year we have said, you know, if we only get $36 a barrel, which is underneath the 40 and change it is today, we can live with the budget that we've set up. Next year, we have risk adjusted it, and by the 3rd year, we're $10 below what the likely scenario is for a barrel of oil. So we're being quite conservative, and we're saying, you know, if everybody's estimates of where oil is going are completely wrong, we can still bring our budget in with the services we're providing. So we've improved our processes from budget 2015. We've learned from budget 2015 because everyone was wrong on where the oil barrel was going to be. So we're protected this time.
But these would be some of the factors that
they
push the date further.
That's right. That's right.
No temporary.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't really push it further.
Well, no.
We'd have to go beyond your risk adjustment.
That's right. So the risk-adjusted oil barrel still allows us to, my view is that we can aim for 2024 with the low conservative number on barrel.
Thank you. Group.
As part of your petrochemical diversification plan, what kind of funds or stimulation are you have in mind for our industrial or non-health related resource plans?
Well, the petrochemical diversification plan is basically a plan that would allow for 3 to 4 big projects. And essentially, it's what it is we agree to forego certain revenue. So it's not revenue that we're banking on or that we ever did bank on. It's foregoing for a period of time revenue that might have otherwise come in, but that we've never banked on. And so what we're in the process of doing is, now that we've announced the program, we've essentially put out the program for people or for companies to bid on. And so we're most likely, in that particular one, we're looking at a variety of different companies. I'm not sure how many ultimately will bid, between 5 and 10, that are looking for, or that are looking at upgrading propane to a different kind of propane. And now this is where the fact that I'm not an engineer or a chemist starts to really impair my ability to describe this. And then to take that product and upgrade it to plastics. And so it's something that a lot of people had already sort of starting to be looking at because we have an excess of propane in Alberta, and it's very low feedstock right now. And then meanwhile, there's actually no place in Canada that's producing this kind of plastic. And so there's sort of I can't remember where, it's Texas or Louisiana, there's one place in the States that is trying to develop this industry, and now we've basically come into the game and decided that we're going to compete with them by foregoing these royalty revenues for a period of time, until such time as the plant gets built and all that kind of stuff. And then at a certain point, the normal royalty revenues would start to come back to the province, but like 5 or 6 years afterwards. So it's not a bunch of little ones. That particular plan contemplates about 2 to 5 companies successfully applying to be part of the program and then setting up work. And then the hope is that if we bring those ones in, that we'll then attract additional ones, because we start to develop kind of a center of that kind of economic activity.
So is this independent of our universities, or?
Absolutely, yeah, it's a totally different program.
Okay.
So with the universities, we still have the Innovates programs that are still there, and then we have the additional programs that link up through the other line items that we saw in that 250 million that we were talking about through the Ministry of Economic Development.
Okay. I think the methane was the other. Methanol was the other one.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
And from methane. And polypropylene rope or plastics. When I was an alderman, I remember going to a plant, and like the Premier says, they were importing plastic pellets from Texas. And we didn't have any place where plastic pellets could be made. They're like the size of Tic Tacs. And for injection molding of plastics, they had to bring them in tanker cars from the United States. So this sort of thing could happen in the future, and as close as Medicine Hat, and have cheaper products as a result, and put people to work. The plants have to get built, and then they need full-time staff in those plants to produce the products.
For the Honorable Minister, the opposition says the corporate tax will cost the average Alberta family $1,000.
It's a little high.
Yeah, it's quite a bit high. Yeah.
And the rebates for the low and the middle income
Right.
will not offset the higher cost for the consumer goods and heats
Sure.
or the carbon tax.
Well, our numbers disagree with that. You won't be surprised to learn. We know that low and middle income families have a more difficult time to pay the carbon levy, so we're going to rebate fully back to them starting in 2017, the cost of the carbon levy.
The whole of it.
Yes, that we're thinking that the amount that a family would have to pay, depending on their consumption, their use, would be less than half of what the opposition says in their numbers. So,
just to put some clarity, the opposition is using rather amorphous projections that talk about what the cost could be in 2030. So they're using 2030 numbers. The cost that they're using is not actually 1,000, it's about 900. And that was a projection, and you can imagine, of course, that's all based on a number of assumptions that could change between now and then. But essentially it's inflation. So they're using 2030 numbers and suggesting that that's what would be in play in 2017. In fact, the rebate numbers, the maximum rebate numbers that we calculated are what we're being told is the average cost per household of the levy. But what you do need to understand is it's average. So typically higher income households use more greenhouse, or create more, use more energy, and so actually will pay more because, you know, they have 2 or 3 cars, or they have a bigger house or whatever, so they will actually pay more. But the average cost is that amount which we then use to calculate the rebates. And so it's really important to understand that the opposition are using numbers that are 15 years down the road.
You to emphasize something about the international market, like the market for the export. I mean, what we could do, because the depreciations of the Canadian dollars is encouraging this Canadian product into the world. You know, do we have any plans on the international market, especially on the export side?
I mean, obviously with the low dollar, our exports go up. You're seeing a bit of a bump in Eastern Canada because their exports have gone up as a result of the low dollar. You're seeing actually one thing that is a bit of a problem on the horizon is the issue around lumber, because forest producers in the U.S. are getting a little nervous around the fact that with the dollar differential, more Canadian lumber is going into their market, and unfortunately the agreement is set to expire. So we may find ourselves with a few fights on that hand, because up until then you're actually seeing Alberta has been exporting well above its quota and just paying the fee for exporting above its quota. And in fact, our forestry industry had been growing very successfully as a result of that. So it depends on what you're exporting and what you're importing in terms of the relative cost. But just in general, one thing we haven't had a chance to talk about one thing that's really critical to us is this issue of getting a pipeline to Tidewater, so that we can diversify our markets. And you know, of course, that we're seeing our oil and gas discounted because we essentially only have one market, and we're competing against our customers become our greatest competitor. And so we need to be able to diversify the markets and be strategic about where we sell to. And we can't do that without a pipeline to Tidewater. And so that's something that you probably have heard, that our government is very committed to lobbying our colleagues in different jurisdictions across the country, as well as the federal government, in terms of getting some progress on that. And we've been doing a lot of work, actually. Not so much with the grandstanding, because we found that doesn't actually work. I mean, we've had 10 years of previous governments sort of grandstanding, beating up on the environmentalists, you know, yelling at each other, tweeting at each other. It's gotten us nowhere. And so what we believe we need to do is actually have intelligent, collaborative negotiating conversations between officials and between leaders at the right setting and the right circumstances to try and get to yes, either west or east on a pipeline. And that's going to be critically important for Alberta. It's going to be critically important for all Canadians, and that is something, and it's a case that we make across the country, and to the extent that Albertans in any setting, in any sector, can make that case to their neighbors across the border or across several borders, it's really important for people to understand how much the Canadian economy needs our energy industry to get the best value for our product.
And that's how much we, as Canadians, need to realize that we should work as a nation.
That's right. Exactly.
Not just provinces. We have to be united on certain grounds, and this is one issue.
Yeah.
It's a national issue.
Absolutely.
Minister, Premier, thank you. It's a good budget, and it's very good figures, so to speak. As comparing to the previous government at the election time, they declared that the deficit is going to be $8 billion at that time. So now, a year after or so, your government have kept really good figures to the lower end, as it's about 10.4, and that you have done a good budget on this. But my question is, in this budget or any initiative from the government to bring out any big corporation offices from within Canada or from overseas to Alberta, so you can put the people to work. Is there any initiative there?
Yes, there's a couple. One is called the Head Office Attraction Fund, and working with the different chambers of commerce and economic development agencies throughout Alberta. There will be $5 million available to go out and find places, find companies that want to come here, to attract them. So that's one aspect. There's regional economic development monies also, I think it's $10 million, that will support the same sort of thing, but region-based throughout Alberta.
I mean, the petrochemical program may or may not result in some head offices, but coming. But I think that it's really important in terms of attracting head offices. What Joe was talking about before is continuing the narrative that had already been in place before, even before the price of oil dropped. This idea that, listen, we have a very young and diverse population that is the best educated in the country. And so we make that case a lot, and more we were seeing people starting to think about coming out to Calgary, coming out to Edmonton for their head offices, in part because the cost of living as well is relatively lower here, yet the quality of life is quite high. And so we continue to make that case, and certainly through the head office attraction efforts, we will continue to do that. We know that Calgary's suffering, obviously, because of the drop in the price of oil, and so we have to find other ways to bring different companies into Calgary, into Edmonton, and that's what our Minister of Economic Development will be working on through this fund.
Right,
And if you know of any head offices that we should reach out to, please let us know.
Sure, I'll bring that out.
Okay.
Absolutely. No, for sure. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Unfortunately, we have run out of time with the Minister and Premier, but I want to thank you all so much for making the trips up to Edmonton, for those of you from Calgary, and taking the time for as well. So thank you to Minister and Premier as well. I think we've had a really productive afternoon.
And thank you, Tom.
Yeah, and thank you for hosting. Yes. It was great, and thank you all for coming so much. It was great.